Mary Cuff is joining us right now. Dr. Mary Cuff has a PhD in literature from Catholic University of America, a homeschooling mom, also teaches with Homeschool Connections. Good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We loved your article over at the Crisis Magazine, The Beauty of Austerity, and I thought it was a nice, inspirational, article, but it also made me think about the struggle of some religious communities right now who are hoping to keep their identity, keep their original charism, and finding it more and more difficult to do so. The pressures coming out of certain dicasteries, out of the Vatican, are making it very difficult for them to maintain that original founding principle of their communities. And this story of Saint Maravillas, I think, could be an inspiration one to them. Maybe you can start by telling us, who is Saint Maravillas?
Sure, yes. She was a Spanish Carmelite Mother Superior prioress. Actually, she was a prioress most of her life at many different Carmels that she founded. She was born in 1891 to the Spanish ambassador to the Vatican, of all things.
Oh, wow.
And felt very early on a vocation to the Carmelite life. But her mother was kind of hesitant, wouldn't agree to her vocation until 1919. So she was kind of a late vocation in a way, as well as an early one. She knew by age 5 she wanted to be a nun, and her mom wouldn't let her join until she was 29, which is kind of an inspiration already there, the endurance that she must have had.
It reminds me of St. Rita and several other saints that were in the same boat as little girls, even setting up their own hermitages and all of that.
Right, yes. Well, she finally joins the Carmel, is there for about 3 years, and receives this intense calling to found a new Carmel on the Cerro, which is it's a mountain in the very geographic center of the Iberian Peninsula. And I mean, she's not even a fully professed nun yet, but everyone says, that sounds awesome. And they let her do it. Mm-hmm. She builds the monastery, and the communists come in the Spanish Civil War, and they take Madrid, and they almost kill her and her entire convent. They've loaded them up on a bus. They're taking them out into the forest to kill them, like they had done their chaplain just a few weeks before. And something changes their mind, and they take them to town and put them in a flat, and they say, you're basically under house arrest. And she manages to flee with her nuns to Salamanca, and she starts a new convent there. The day that convent is finished being built, the Bishop of Madrid writes her and says, can you come back? Franco has retaken Madrid. It's safe now. So she says, well, I've got this convent here, and I want it to stay. Great. But I'll take 3 nuns, and we'll go back. And so now there are 2 Carmels. Now, Carmelite monasteries, they're autonomous from each other. So she leaves that monastery. There's a new prioress, and she returns to the Cerro. It's completely destroyed, completely razed to the ground. And there's no funds, no help to rebuild it. So she and her 3 nuns build it back up. And she would go on to do this, build Carmels from nothing, almost 20 more times. And she would send nuns to India. They founded 3 convents in India. And in her 80s, she was trying to found one in Japan. She even tried to go to Japan herself because they were running into some problems, and her bishop was like, nope, you're not leaving Spain. I need you. So unfortunately, the Japanese Carmel never managed to come to fruition, but almost 20 Carmels in the space of one life. And each Carmel she would build on the ruins of an ancient Carmel that was very dear to the Carmelite order, either a Carmel that Teresa of Avila had lived in, or John of the Cross, or had some deep connection to the Carmelite spirituality. And this monastery had fallen into disrepair and was just ruins, and she would buy the land and start a new Carmel on it. So, I mean, that aspect of her life alone is just mind-blowing, that she was managed to do all of this.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think a lot of people... In fact, I've been wanting to do more programming on the Spanish Civil War because more priests were murdered by the communists and anarchists and fascists in that Civil War than even in the French Revolution. Over 6,000, and many religious communities were wiped out, as you intimated. So, what a scary time to have to go through that, and she did so with great courage. But we're going to be up against a break here in a few moments, so I don't want to go too far. But I know that in all of this amazing story, she also was entering a time when the church was seeing great upheaval, post Vatican II, and so many things were changing so rapidly, and yet she had a very strong conviction of their founding principles.
Yes, she did. So in addition to fighting the communists, she fights the modernizers. She, deeply respectful of the Pope, deeply respectful of the council process, but was very concerned about sort of the winds of change and sort of where they could blow. And starting in the 50s, there was increased pressure to sort of modernize, update, we need to be different. And she said, no, the Carmelites need to follow Teresa the way she laid down the constitutions. It's worked. And she founded all these Carmels because she got a flood of vocations. There wasn't room at her Carmel, so she had to create new ones to cope with the huge influx of vocations. And she said, why break a good thing? People want austerity. They want the original rule. And there was this pressure on her to update, to modernize. And unfortunately, a lot of these modernizations have been sort of repackaged in 2018 and are now being forced on a lot of these same Carmels that got an exemption initially from Rome to not have to do this, to join monastic federations, to have joint novitiates with other monasteries, things like this that sort of actually are prohibited by the Teresan Constitution of 1571. And she said, we don't want to change anything because a saint made this, and it has made saints, and it is making saints. And it's what got them through the Spanish Civil War. They don't need to suddenly update. Just to update. And they were going to be forced to. The global order was going to force them to do this. And she was distraught. And she said, all we can do is pray, but prayer is the most powerful weapon. So they actually recreated the exact prayer regimen that they did during the Spanish Civil War to pray for deliverance against these new rules. And Pope Paul VI intervened and said, leave them alone. They don't have to do that. And then in 1990, John Paul II actually created and approved constitutions based off of her pushback, which are essentially the original constitution. So now Carmelite monasteries can choose if they want to be in the updated ones, called the 1991 constitutions, or the original ones, which are called the 1990 constitutions. And it's thanks to her that they have managed to preserve intact the original constitutions.
All right, hold that thought. I wanted to bring up the one point as a follow-up to that is, do you think that the order would have fared as well, her or community in particular, if they didn't have the strong personality of Saint Maravillas? The strong, leadership, the strong person in her to sort of lead the way, to be, to have that courage to face communists and to persevere through it all.
Well, she definitely didn't think so. I think probably the answer is yes. But she once said, people only pay attention to me because of my name, because it's a weird name. It means wonders, right? She was named after the wonders of God. And she was embarrassed by her name. And she said, if I was named Maria, no one would even pay attention to me, which is probably not true. But it shows great humility that she thought it was just a weird name was what got her some success. She attracted deeply religious women, though, and I think sort of recognized like. So, yes, she was a huge contributing force to the sort of the vitality of the Carmelite order at that time. But she told her nuns, I'm staying at the Cerro. When communists were attacking the monastery, they were trying to light it on fire. The nuns had to stay up all night long taking shifts to sort of watch out for attacks and put out fires. And she said, anyone who wants to, she was deeply connected with, Spanish aristocracy, that she said, I can get you out of Spain. And they all said, no, we're staying with you. We're staying here. In fact, they had all decided that they didn't even want to flee if the opportunity arose. They wanted to stay and die as martyrs.
Yeah.
I mean, God didn't decide to have them be martyrs,
Praise
but
be to
they
God.
were all ready to a none. They were ready to be martyrs. So it wasn't just her great personality kept this going, but I think it's the Carmelite tradition. And she recognized that the Carmelite tradition sort of crafts you into a saint. And so she was surrounded by women who were contributing to this as well. So I think it was very much a community effort. With the grace of God.
You know, that kind of reminds me of the fact that, I mean, there were many orders during this time period that went through very similar things, but most of them, if not all of them, did not get the privilege that these Carmelites did. I'm thinking of, you know, the Passionists received their rule was inspired directly by the Holy Ghost and by Our Lady, and it was written down, and then they changed their constitutions afterwards. And same thing, I believe it was, I forget the name of the order, but they are the ones who their motto was never reformed, because they never needed reform, and yet they had to reform. And so now we're in the situation. What do all these communities, what can they learn from this story, and something to imitate? And I know you said in the story, you know, prayer is the most powerful thing, but, you know, sometimes we're like, well, yes, prayer is powerful. And there's a misattributed quote to St. Augustine, pray as if everything depends on God, but act as if everything depends on you. So what practically, along with prayer, could an order do in imitation of her?
Well, I think a lot of orders, whether they know of her or not, are sort of taking a page out of her book these days, in that a lot of orders that have sort of success in attracting vocations, or orders that have sort of stepped back their reforms and are trying to be more authentic to their original charism, they're being rewarded by it, and they've noticed. And so now Vatican is trying to push these same rules that Maravillas fought, and they're now, instead of highly recommending them, they are now requiring them. And a lot of monastic communities are pushing back and saying, that will kill our vocations. You know, we don't want to be like these orders that are dying out. They were the ones that agreed to go along with these federations and these updated rules, and sort of this, you know, modern people need to have it a little bit easier, and we don't need to be so austere. And these modern orders now are saying, wait a minute, why do a broken thing that we've already got 60 years of information is broken? Yeah. And I think the thing that they can take from Maravillas is that she was faithful to Rome, and she was faithful to her charism, and she said both, not either or, both. And, you know, she said it was a miracle that the Pope intervened, because she didn't think he was going to, but he did. He intervened. Two different popes intervened twice, and saved what was so great and that she knew was the source of her success. So I think that's really the message that she has for us today, is never compromise, both, you know.
Amen.
Dr. Cuff, you know, this story reminds me of the sudden boom in Catholic lay faithful looking for the Latin Mass, you know. Mm-hmm. What do you think attracted so many vocations to the Carmels, and what parallels do you see with the influx of people looking towards tradition nowadays?
Well, one of the things that Maravillas insisted on in her Carmels was simplicity and poverty and austerity and faithfulness. And that's just, there's something that's just so real about that. You know that you're really doing something when you are trying to, you know, instead of conform something to you, or kind of sort of, you know, oh, this makes me feel good. Like, no, it doesn't make you feel good. But it feels right, and you know it's right, and you know that it is shaping you. And I think a lot of lay Catholics we're kind of tired of the hamburger helper version of Catholicism that we were fed as kids, and we want the steak dinner. And a lot of us got a taste of it and said, wow, can I have more of that? And I think that's what attracted the nuns to Maravillas, is that, you know, spiritually, she was saying steak dinner all the time.
She reminds me so much of Maximilien Kolbe, and one of my patrons, who, when he went to Japan, Adrian bought me a great book on his time in Japan for Christmas, and I've just really been loving it. It reminded me so much of this. Hundreds came because of, I think, of his charisma, of his personality, of his austerity, and yet many realized in the process that they weren't cut out, or they weren't ready for the difficulties involved in this holy poverty that he embraced to a great extent. In fact, there are a couple of stories of these priests that would come to try in hopes of carrying on the mission, but they would fall away quickly because they realized they really didn't have the same level of commitment to this austere life as Max Kolbe did. So talk about the austerity part of this story of Saint Maravillas. What kind of austerity are we talking about, and how did her community fare after her passing?
My understanding is that her community after her passing very much held on to what she set down, and there are lots of 1990s Carmels throughout the world. There's many in the United States, and the great majority of them, their vocations are booming, and austerity for them means strict enclosure. So they remain in their convents. They don't sort of pop out for a fun time or to, go do stuff, because they recognize they are a cloistered order, and they take that very seriously. Some of them take it so seriously that they don't have a digital presence. Some of them don't allow their faces to be photographed because they want to maintain a digital enclosure as well. So they really think through the sort of what these rules mean for them, and they try to follow them, deeply. One of the things that she did with her austerity was her personal austerity was she would only sleep 3 hours a night, and she would sleep sitting up.
Wow.
But this was a personal decision. She didn't require her nuns to do it. It was, it was a thing that she decided that she needed to do. But she did not require her nuns to do it. So she recognized, different people have different levels of austerity that they can achieve or need to achieve. And she achieved one that's unimaginable to me. Yeah. But she recognized that.
And her community today, you said that you think that they're still surviving, persevering?
There's many of the communities that follow after her tradition. The 1990s Carmels in Spain, there's quite a number of them, and there's quite a few in the United States. And I've been in contact with a few of the U.S. ones, and they seem amazing.
We mentioned a minute ago or 2 minutes ago or a couple of minutes back about sort of like the data is in, right? We've had 60 years of data. And if you had a company whose CEO had 60 years of, falling religious vocations and falling sacramental baptisms and sacramental marriages and parishes closing, every data point is negative. You wouldn't be CEO for very long, and yet we're seeing that in the Holy Catholic Church, especially religious communities. Do you see a turnaround? Is that part of the reason why you wanted to tell the story of Saint Maravillas?
Yes, very much so. Especially now, once I found out about her when I was actually researching the 2018 requirements for monastic communities that's receiving such pushback. I'd never heard of her before. And she pushed back the first time, and there are nuns pushing back now. And it's just crazy that they're trying to do the same thing that failed 60 years ago nowadays.
Wow. We're out of time. I'm sorry to have to cut you off, but what a great article. I highly encourage everybody to check it out. The Beauty of Austerity over at crisismagazine.com. Dr. Mary Cuff, God love you. Thank you for your time today. We're very grateful to you.
No, thank you very much.
All right. Praise be to God. Saint Maravillas, pray for us. Pray for all the religious communities fighting to keep their first founding principles in their life and their charism. Let's pray for them today.